What if the stroke didn't start with a stumble, but with what you ate last hour? Welcome back to the Senior Health Podcast, where the calm of Eastern tradition meets the precision of Western science, guiding you towards strength and clarity after 60. Today, we're joined by someone who doesn't just study longevity, he lives it. At over 100 years old, Japan's oldest practicing physician still walks to work, still sees patients, and still believes the best medicine is often the simplest one. He's witnessed a century of health fads rise and fall, and quietly outlived them all with grace, energy, and a clear mind. Dr. Hinohara, your presence is a gift. Thank you for joining us once more.
Thank you, John. It's always good to be here, especially for a conversation that could prevent the kind of stroke that catches people off guard. Too many seniors think a stroke begins with a dramatic collapse, when in fact it often starts with small, overlooked habits, especially in the first hour of the day. Our brain stability doesn't vanish overnight. It's worn down gradually by quiet decisions made before breakfast. And that's what makes this topic so important. In today's episode, we'll explore the morning habits that can subtly increase stroke risk, disrupt circulation, and drain your brain's energy. We'll discuss the daily foods, drinks, and vitamins that seniors should be mindful of after 60. And toward the end, we'll focus on what the brain truly needs as we age. This episode isn't about striving for perfection. It's about finding the right timing and rhythm and providing your brain with what it needs before it starts signaling for more serious interventions.
I can't agree more with you. You know, doctor, this topic matters to me personally. Years ago, my mother had a stroke early in the morning without warning, but looking back, there were signs. She'd been lightheaded a few times after waking, once even grabbing the wall for balance. We didn't think much of it until it was too late. So let me ask this question to everyone listening. Have you ever stood up in the morning and felt that wave of dizziness? It might seem small, but it could be your brain's first quiet warning, and sharing your story might help someone else catch it in time.
That's why this conversation is so urgent, because what seems ordinary, waking up, standing, taking your pills, can quietly become dangerous if the body isn't supported. In Japan, mornings begin gently, with a glass of water, a slow rise, and food that fuels instead of shocks. This rhythm isn't just cultural, it's protective. For decades, it's helped keep stroke rates lower, especially among elders during those vulnerable early hours. But in the US, someone suffers a stroke every 40 seconds, and for adults over 60, the risk spikes in the morning. When blood is thickest, pressure unstable, and habits like skipping hydration or taking medications on an empty stomach quietly stack the odds.
That is a statistic we should take more seriously.
Yes, John, but I have good news too. Up to 80% of strokes are preventable, but only if we listen, not just when the body screams, but when it whispers.
All right, doctor. So now let's start right there, because most people have no idea that the first 60 minutes after waking up could be the most dangerous of the entire day.
The first hour after waking is not a neutral window. It's one of the most biologically sensitive periods in the entire day. During sleep, your body naturally enters a state of dehydration. Your blood becomes slightly thicker, your vessels a little tighter, and cortisol, your stress hormone, begins to rise sharply. For a young person, these changes are manageable, but for someone over 60, with aging arteries and possibly medications in the mix, that combination can quietly set the stage for a stroke.
That's something most people never consider. They think sleep resets the body, but it also leaves it temporarily more vulnerable.
Yes, but what makes it so risky is that it doesn't feel dangerous at all. You wake up, reach for your phone, skip water, maybe take your pills on an empty stomach. You're not in pain, but your vascular system is already under strain. The symptoms, if they appear at all, are easy to dismiss. A moment of dizziness, a slow step, a brain that just feels off.
That's what makes it so unsettling. It feels like nothing. You don't think stroke, you think, I'm just groggy, or maybe I stood up too fast. And by the time someone notices a real pattern, forgetfulness, instability, even clumsiness, the body may have been showing these warnings for weeks. So let's break this down clearly. What are the habits that make this vulnerable window even more dangerous?
The first one is skipping water. After 6, 7, sometimes 8 hours without fluid, the body wakes up in a state of mild dehydration. This thickens the blood, reduces circulation to the brain, and raises the risk of clotting, especially in people with high blood pressure or cholesterol. I always tell my patients, circulation before stimulation. No coffee, no screens, no stress until the blood is flowing cleanly. In fact, a Japanese study published in the Journal of Stroke and Cerebrovascular Diseases found that dehydration in the early morning hours was associated with a higher incidence of ischemic strokes, particularly in older adults. I always tell my patients, circulation before stimulation. No coffee, no screens, no stress, until the blood is flowing cleanly.
That makes sense. But what if someone says they're just not thirsty in the morning?
Then they've trained their body not to ask. But the need is still there.
You're reminding me of my own father. He used to go straight to his newspaper, drink 2 strong coffees, and never touch water until lunch. And now I think about how often he'd complain of lightheadedness walking down the stairs. We thought it was age, but maybe it was the absence of fuel, or the wrong kind of fuel. That's one habit. But let's keep going. What's the second habit on your list?
The second habit is standing up too fast. After lying down for hours, blood tends to pool in the lower half of the body. In younger adults, the nervous system quickly compensates. But in older adults, those reflexes are slower and less precise. When someone rises suddenly without giving the body a moment to recalibrate, blood pressure can drop and the brain receives less oxygen, even for just a few seconds. That's when we see dizziness, instability, or even sudden fainting, especially in the bathroom or hallway. It doesn't always lead to a full collapse, but those micro events, the swaying, the staggering, they chip away at confidence. And over time, they reduce a person's willingness to move freely. That in itself raises risk. Fear of falling leads to less movement leads to worse circulation. It becomes a feedback loop.
It's hard because that sounds so ordinary. Who hasn't stood up quickly? Who hasn't rushed to turn off an alarm or answer the door?
You are right, John, but that rush is the danger. I tell my patients, take 20 seconds. Roll to your side, breathe, sit slowly, and only then stand. It feels like nothing, but that moment helps your circulation catch up with your brain. Especially for those on blood pressure medication, this gentle transition can prevent a dangerous dip. It also signals the nervous system to shift gradually into wakefulness, instead of shocking it.
So what about people who say they don't have time for that?
Then they need to ask why they're in such a hurry and whether rushing is worth the cost of confusion or collapse.
I think that's the hidden part. These are things we've done for decades without thinking. But after 60, the margin for error shrinks. And those first steps out of bed aren't just about balance. They're about protecting brain flow, clarity, and confidence. So let's talk about the third habit that's quietly making mornings more dangerous.
It is checking your phone immediately after waking. Most people don't realize it, but information is a form of stimulation. And stimulation before circulation can disrupt the entire nervous system. The brain, especially after sleep, is operating in a slower, more vulnerable rhythm. When you're flooded with headlines, messages, or stress-triggering notifications, your cortisol rises even faster than it already would naturally. That sharp rise, combined with thick blood and low movement, creates a perfect storm for vascular strain. I've seen patients who start every day with tension and wonder why they feel foggy, tight in the chest, or short of breath by 9 a.m. It's not just anxiety, it's chemistry. The brain hasn't finished clearing overnight waste. It hasn't been fueled or hydrated, but it's already being asked to process threats. And that imbalance, over time, erodes stability.
So what you're saying is that the mental load of modern life, especially in the first few minutes of the day, isn't just emotional, it's biological?
Exactly. And it becomes even more dangerous when it's combined with another common habit: skipping food. Too many seniors take medications or caffeine with nothing in their stomach. That causes blood sugar to drop, which the brain interprets as stress. Blood vessels constrict, and that's when things get risky. Dizziness, fog, even momentary blackouts.
And what if they're trying to fast for health reasons?
Then they need to understand that fasting after 60 is not the same as fasting at 30. The aging brain is less forgiving of missed fuel.
That brings back memories of a patient I once saw, a woman in her 70s who was trying intermittent fasting because her granddaughter had recommended it. She was skipping breakfast, drinking coffee on an empty stomach, and taking 2 medications. She kept saying she felt off, but couldn't describe it. And eventually she ended up in the ER with a transient ischemic attack, a mini stroke. So now that we've looked at the 4 common mistakes, let's talk about foods that seem healthy but raise stroke risk.
One of the most misunderstood foods is dried fruit. It's often marketed as a healthy snack, full of fiber, natural sugars, and vitamins. But what many people miss is that dried fruit is extremely concentrated. A handful of dried apricots or raisins can spike blood sugar just as quickly as a candy bar, especially when eaten alone. For someone with reduced insulin sensitivity or blood pressure medications, that sugar spike followed by a crash can trigger lightheadedness or confusion, both of which raise stroke risk. I'm not saying dried fruit is always harmful, but it needs to be paired with protein or fat to slow down absorption. Otherwise, especially if eaten late in the evening, it can throw off overnight blood pressure and glucose control. That's when we see people waking up dizzy, weak, or disoriented.
That really challenges how we think about healthy. People trust foods with a natural label, especially when they've grown up thinking fruit is always good. But they don't consider portion size, timing, or how processing changes the impact. Has there ever been a food you thought was healthy, only to find out later it was doing more harm than good? What shocked you the most when you took a closer look? Share your experience in the comments. It could be the eye-opener someone else has been waiting for. Now let's talk about fruit juices. Do they work the same way?
Yes, even more dramatically. Juicing removes the fiber, and fiber is what slows down the absorption of sugar. Without it, you're essentially drinking fruit in its most aggressive form, and that can be dangerous, especially first thing in the morning or before bed.
So would a glass of orange juice on an empty stomach fall into that category?
It would, especially for someone on blood pressure, meds, diuretics, or blood thinners. There's also the risk of grapefruit interfering with drug metabolism, which can elevate medication levels unexpectedly.
That one's really tricky, because we've all been told to start the day with juice or fruit with breakfast. But for older adults, It seems like those same foods can work against us when the timing or pairing is off. And what I hear you saying is, it's not about removing these things forever, it's about using them wisely. So we've covered dried fruit and juice. Let's move on to the third food that's actually harming seniors and causing strokes.
The third food I'd point to is whole wheat toast, not because the wheat is harmful on its own, but because of how it's often eaten and what it's combined with. Many seniors believe they're making a smart choice by switching from white bread, and that's a good instinct. But the problem comes when they eat toast on its own, or just with a sugary jam. That kind of simple carbohydrate, even if it's labeled whole grain, can still raise blood sugar quickly if there's no protein or fat to balance it. Over time, those morning sugar spikes damage the inner lining of blood vessels, what we call endothelial tissue, and that's one of the earliest steps toward stroke risk.
That's something I see all the time. Someone thinks, it's whole grain, so it must be safe. But if it's just toast and jam, their body responds like they've had dessert for breakfast.
Precisely, because in older adults, insulin sensitivity naturally declines, making it even more important to balance so-called healthy carbs with care. A slice of toast might seem innocent, but without structure around it, it becomes just another fast-burning fuel, and that roller coaster, the spike and the crash, puts pressure on both the brain and the heart. It's not about fear, it's about understanding what your body can handle now, not what it could handle 30 years ago.
That's so interesting because I've had patients swear by their morning toast, saying it gives them just enough energy to get going. But when we looked at their blood work, they were crashing by mid-morning and reaching for more sugar to compensate. So you're saying it's not the toast itself, but the way it's used?
Exactly. A food is never just a food. It's the timing, the pairing, the context. And the older we get, the more these details matter. That slice of toast could be helpful with a boiled egg or nut butter, but by itself, it turns into a short fuse. In fact, a 2019 study from Tufts University found that older adults who consumed high glycemic breakfast foods without adequate protein or fat had significantly greater blood sugar fluctuations and decreased cognitive performance later in the morning. It's not about avoiding the toast, it's about giving your brain the stable fuel it needs to function well.
So it's really about how the body responds to the package, not just the label on the bread.
Yes, and once endothelial damage begins, it becomes much harder to reverse. Prevention is always easier than repair.
That ties into what I've seen in practice. It's not that one breakfast makes or breaks someone's health. It's that subtle repetition over weeks or months that builds up risk quietly. And because these foods are so normalized, people have no reason to question them. So let's talk about fourth on your list. What is it?
The fourth one is low-fat flavored yogurt. It sounds light. It's often marketed as a breakfast food, and many seniors eat it thinking they're making a heart-healthy choice. But most of those yogurts are packed with added sugar, and the lack of fat means there's nothing to slow down how quickly that sugar hits the bloodstream.
That's something I've seen even in hospital meal plans.
And the problem is, it gives a false sense of health. The sugar can lead to inflammation, which strains the arteries. Over time, that inflammation damages vessel walls and increases clotting risk.
So even something that feels gentle or easy to digest might be working against you?
Yes, especially when eaten alone without fiber or protein to stabilize the response. And for someone already on medication, that extra sugar load can amplify imbalances.
It's sobering, really, because none of these are what we'd call junk food. They're things most people over 60 have trusted for decades. Toast, fruit juice, a yogurt cup. They feel light, safe, easy. Now, doctor, What's the fifth and final food on your list that causes strokes for seniors?
The fifth one is packaged instant oatmeal, especially the flavored varieties. They're convenient, yes, but they often contain a mix of quick cooking starches and added sugars that digest too rapidly. What starts as a warm, comforting meal can lead to a sharp insulin spike and leave the brain underfueled just an hour later.
I wouldn't have guessed that. Oatmeal has such a health halo.
Plain slow-cooked oats can be beneficial, but the instant kind, especially with added sweeteners, behaves more like dessert than breakfast.
And for someone managing blood pressure or circulation, that spike matters, doesn't it?
It does, especially if it's combined with coffee and medications. You end up with dehydration, stimulation, and a sugar crash all before 9 a.m.
That gives me a whole new way to think about healthy starts, because it's not just what we eat, it's how the body reacts to it at this age. We're not fueling a 25-year-old body anymore, and what worked back then might now be tipping the scales toward instability. So now that we've covered the 5 sneaky foods raising stroke risk, let's turn briefly to something that might surprise people even more. When we were preparing this episode, you mentioned a few fruits that could quietly raise the risk of brain stroke, especially in seniors. Let's go through those so we can give our listeners the full picture.
You are right, John. There are indeed some fruits we should add here. The first fruit I would caution seniors about is watermelon. It's not that it's inherently bad, but it does have some properties that could be problematic when consumed in large amounts, especially if eaten at the wrong time. Watermelon is full of water, which makes it a natural diuretic. This diuretic effect is typically mild, but in certain cases it can stimulate the kidneys to flush out important minerals like potassium and sodium, particularly if consumed in excess or late in the evening. Watermelon can promote hydration, but this flushing effect can disrupt the body's electrolyte balance and lower blood pressure, especially in seniors already on blood pressure medications or diuretics. However, the effect is generally not drastic unless consumed in very large quantities. Moderation is key here.
It's surprising to think of watermelon as anything but refreshing and hydrating, but in moderation, it's typically safe for most people. However, for someone already on blood pressure meds or diuretics, even a few slices late at night could potentially cause dizziness or confusion the next morning due to a sudden dip in blood pressure.
It's not just about sugar, it's about how watermelon behaves in the body. While it might cool you down, it also flushes you out, and without proper mineral balance or fluid timing, that can create instability in the body's circulatory system.
Now that we've covered watermelon, let's talk about another fruit that can be problematic for seniors, especially if eaten at the wrong time. What's next on the list?
The second on my list that I would caution seniors about is pineapple. It's often praised for its enzymes and vitamin C, but it's also highly acidic and contains a significant amount of natural sugars. While this combination can be beneficial for digestion in some people, it may cause discomfort for seniors with sensitive stomachs or those taking certain medications. When consumed in the evening, pineapple may contribute to acid reflux, poor sleep, and possibly even nighttime blood pressure fluctuations.
It's interesting to note that some patients snack on pineapple after dinner thinking it's good for digestion. However, they often report disrupted sleep, leg cramps, or waking up feeling unwell, and they rarely connect these symptoms back to the fruit. So, it's not about pineapple being harmful, but rather about timing and individual sensitivity.
Exactly. Pineapple isn't inherently bad, but in older adults, it's important to be mindful of high-acid fruits. The same enzyme that helps with digestion can sometimes overstimulate the gut or interfere with medications like blood thinners.
Would pairing it with other foods like protein or fat make it safer?
Yes, absolutely. Pairing it with something stabilizing can slow down the absorption process and reduce the acid load on the stomach.
It's fascinating how context can change the effect. What we once thought of as a light fruit before bed could actually trigger inflammation, disrupt blood sugar levels, or even put stress on the microvascular system in the brain. The truth is, seniors are rarely warned about these potential issues. So let's move on. What's the third fruit that might be raising stroke risk without them even realizing it?
The third one is grapes, especially the seedless, sweet varieties that have been bred for maximum sugar content. While they contain antioxidants, they also deliver a quick hit of fructose, which can overwhelm the system if eaten in large amounts. For seniors, this can lead to a sudden rise in blood sugar, followed by a dip that affects balance and mental clarity. When grapes are eaten at night or on an empty stomach, that effect is even stronger.
I think that one will surprise a lot of people. Grapes are in nearly every healthy snack list I've seen. People pack them in lunches, nibble on them before bed, even mix them into yogurt without a second thought. And I've never heard anyone talk about their impact on circulation or stroke risk.
Because most people are focused only on the antioxidant story. But sugar, even natural sugar, doesn't stop being sugar just because it comes in a round little fruit. And when the vascular system is already under strain, that kind of spike matters.
So eating a handful in the morning with breakfast makes a difference?
Yes, absolutely. When eaten with protein or fiber, and in small amounts, the body handles them much better. The danger comes when they're treated like water, consumed without limits.
That's such an easy trap to fall into because it's the quantity and the context that change everything. Grapes after a full meal? Probably fine. A bowl of grapes alone at 9 p.m.? That's a setup for sugar swings and sleep disruption. And when that becomes routine, it adds up. So now that we've covered the 3 fruits seniors should be more thoughtful with, let's talk about supplements and so-called healthy vitamins that many seniors are taking every day, without realizing some of them could quietly raise the risk of a brain stroke.
When it comes to vitamins and supplements, the biggest mistake I see is not the type, but the layering. Many seniors take a multivitamin, then add extra vitamin D, some B complex, maybe a calcium tablet, all without realizing how those overlap. Over time, this stacking effect can quietly push certain nutrients into toxic ranges. Too much vitamin E can thin the blood too much. Excess vitamin A can raise intracranial pressure, and high doses of B6 can damage nerves instead of supporting them.
I've seen that too. People mean well, they're trying to stay ahead of aging, but they end up building a chemistry their body can't regulate. It's not that the vitamins themselves are bad. It's that after 60, the margin for error gets smaller. And unless someone's doing regular blood work, they have no way of knowing what their body actually needs or what it's already had too much of.
Exactly. Supplementation should be targeted, not automatic. Calcium, for example, is important, but without enough K2 or magnesium, it can harden in the arteries instead of helping the bones. And vitamin D, while essential, can elevate calcium in the blood too much when taken blindly. The key is precision, not volume, especially for brains and vessels that are aging.
So the more is better approach becomes risky, not helpful.
Very much so. After a certain age, every pill should be asking what's missing, not just what's popular.
That's something I wish more supplement companies would talk about. The marketing always promises strength, energy, clarity, but it rarely comes with real warnings for older adults. It's easy to assume that because it's natural, it's safe, but biology isn't that simple. So now that we've looked at the drinks, fruits, and vitamins that increase stroke risk, let's talk about the signs, the subtle shifts seniors should never ignore, because they often arrive quietly, long before a stroke makes itself known.
The early signs of stroke are rarely dramatic. They're small, almost dismissible. A moment of clumsiness, a word that won't come, a second of feeling lightheaded for no reason. Seniors often chalk it up to fatigue or age, but these are whispers from the brain that something's off. A minor change in coordination or a sudden blank moment can be the brain struggling to get the oxygen or nutrients it needs.
That reminds me of a patient who kept dropping her keys. She said it was nothing, just that her hands felt a little off. But it happened 3 times in a week, and then once she forgot the name of her street. We ran some basic tests, and she was having transient ischemic attacks, mini strokes, that could have easily led to something much worse.
Yes, those tiny moments are often the only warnings we get. And if we ignore them, we lose the chance to intervene early. Sometimes it's a change in handwriting or walking into a room and forgetting why. Other times it's just a brief moment of visual distortion or sudden confusion.
So you're saying even a few seconds of strangeness should be taken seriously?
Absolutely, because the brain doesn't send those signals unless something important is being disrupted.
That's a critical message, especially for people who think it'll pass or I'm just tired today. The earlier we respond to those signals, with hydration, food, movement, or medical care, the better our chances of preventing something serious. And that's what I want to shift to now. We've looked at the habits and choices that increase risk, so let's end on a strong note with what actually helps. What foods, drinks, and vitamins truly support the aging brain? And what simple habits can seniors build into their mornings to stay sharp, steady, and resilient as the years go on?
The most protective thing a senior can do each morning is drink water. Before coffee, before food, before anything else. After 6 to 8 hours of sleep, the body wakes up slightly dehydrated, and even a small drop in fluid balance can affect brain function and blood pressure. A full glass of room temperature water helps thin the blood gently, support circulation, and ease the body into movement. It's a simple act, but it signals to the entire system that it's time to shift from rest to wakefulness without a shock.
That's such a quiet, almost ritualistic start, and yet it seems to do more than most of the fancy routines out there. I've started recommending it to patients, especially those who wake up feeling foggy or stiff. The ones who actually try it often come back surprised by how something so small could make such a noticeable difference. So what's the second habit you recommend to seniors?
The second I recommend to seniors is standing up slowly. Seniors often forget that blood pools in the legs overnight, and rushing to stand can cause a sudden drop in brain perfusion. That's why some people feel dizzy or even black out briefly. It's not weakness, it's physiology.
So it's not just about avoiding a fall, it's about protecting the brain from sudden pressure changes.
Exactly. By sitting up first, breathing deeply, maybe doing a gentle stretch before standing, we're giving the cardiovascular system a chance to catch up.
That's something we overlook because it feels too basic. But the brain doesn't need complexity, it needs stability. So doctor, what's the third habit on your list for seniors looking to prevent brain stroke?
The third on my list is having a light, balanced breakfast within the first hour of waking. Protein, a bit of healthy fat, maybe some fiber. These help stabilize blood sugar and support neurotransmitter production. A boiled egg and half an avocado is more protective than most people realize.
We've been taught to either skip breakfast or make it sweet, cereal, toast, juice. But a breakfast built around stability changes how the entire morning unfolds. Now we have covered 3. Let's talk about the final habit. What's the number 4th habit on your list?
The 4th habit is movement. Not a workout, not a walk. Just 5 minutes of slow, intentional movement. Raising the arms, rolling the shoulders, shifting your weight side to side. These wake up the vestibular system and improve blood flow to the brain.
That's so different from the all or nothing mindset. It's not about getting 10,000 steps right away. It's about honoring the transition from rest to wakefulness.
Exactly. You're building rhythm, not performance. That rhythm sets the tone for blood pressure, cognition, and mood. And for the seniors, those first 30 minutes are the foundation of the entire day. So, is there one small habit that's helped you feel sharper in the morning? Don't underestimate it. Your routine might be the one someone else needs to hear.
I think that's the most powerful shift we can offer. That stroke prevention isn't about fear or perfection. It's about understanding how the body changes with age and meeting it with clarity, not panic. These morning habits aren't dramatic, but they're deliberate. And over time, they become a kind of quiet insurance policy, one that protects not just the brain, but the dignity and independence that come with it. Now, doctor, let's wrap up this episode. Share with us the foods, fruits, and vitamins you believe are most important for seniors to include in their daily routine.
If I had to choose a few essentials, I'd start with 3 core foods: sardines, sweet potatoes, and pumpkin seeds. Sardines offer omega-3s, calcium, and vitamin D in one natural source. They protect the brain and heart without overloading the system. Sweet potatoes are rich in complex carbs and potassium, which helps stabilize blood pressure. And pumpkin seeds, though small, are powerful, full of magnesium, zinc, and plant-based protein.
Sardines and pumpkin seeds I expected, but sweet potatoes is an interesting one. I've seen them help regulate blood sugar in some of my older diabetic patients.
Yes, they digest slowly and don't trigger spikes. And they contain beta-carotene, which supports eye health and cognitive function as we age.
Would you say they're better than traditional white potatoes in that regard?
Absolutely. Especially for seniors, sweet potatoes provide more steady energy and don't deplete minerals the way white potatoes often can when fried or overly processed.
That's a helpful distinction. Not all carbs are created equal.
Exactly. And when it comes to fruits, I recommend kiwi, papaya, and tart cherries. Kiwi is low in sugar and high in vitamin C. Papaya supports digestion and reduces inflammation. Tart cherries, especially in the evening, can help regulate sleep and reduce nighttime blood pressure swings.
So one fruit for the morning, one for digestion, and one for recovery. That's a beautiful way to think about it.
Yes, it's not about eating more. It's about timing what supports the body at each stage of the day.
And what about vitamins? The ones seniors trust most.
The vitamins I recommend are magnesium, B12, and K2. Magnesium supports blood vessel function and muscle relaxation. B12 helps prevent cognitive decline and supports nerve health, especially in those with absorption issues. And vitamin K2 is critical. It helps guide calcium into the bones and away from the arteries, where it can cause real harm if left unchecked.
That's such an important point, because it shifts the mindset from just take calcium to make sure your body knows where to put it. These 3, magnesium, B12, K2, are quiet protectors. And when paired with the right foods and fruits, they form a kind of daily shield for the aging brain. So with that, let's end this episode with one final message. Something simple and encouraging that every listener can carry into tomorrow.
I'd say every new day is a second chance to protect your brain, so begin it wisely.
That's beautifully said. If today's episode helped you rethink even one habit, share it with someone you love, because knowledge like this saves lives quietly, over time. And if you'd like to dive deeper into brain health, don't miss this episode. We'll meet you there.